Here are several details present in common objects which have an unsuspected meaning. Let's start with a detail we've never paid attention to, but we've all seen it before: the hole at the tip of the cap of Bic pens. You've handled this object throughout your childhood, and you may have once or twice vaguely considered this seemingly insignificant feature. In reality, the reason manufacturers include this detail in their designs is not for form's sake. Let's say you're absent-mindedly chewing on the cap of your pen, and suddenly you accidentally suck it in and swallow it. Unfortunately, this happens, most often to children. Well, if the piece of plastic gets stuck in your throat, you'll be saved by this tiny hole. It will allow air to circulate a little bit, preventing you from choking to death. Besides, this is not a specificity of the brand. These are international safety standards that must be met. That said, this small opening has other, less obvious uses. For example, it can prevent the ink from drying due to the lack of air, or it facilitates the sliding of the cap by letting the air escape. When purchasing certain garments, customers are sometimes surprised to receive a sample of the fabric in a laminated pouch at the same time. This may have happened to you. Naturally, buyers are curious to know why this piece of clothing was offered to them. Is it to fill a possible tear? Not exactly. However, these samples do have a preventive purpose. They are simply a way to get to know the material of the coat, shirt, or dress purchased. It is a means of experimentation on a small scale. The sample helps you to find the most appropriate method to safely wash your new clothes. This way, you will avoid degrading it. Now let's talk about the most familiar, iconic, and worn shoes in the world: Converse. Owning a pair of these traditional shoes is almost a necessity when you're in middle or high school. Although Converse shoes have gone out of fashion to some extent, they are still sold in quantity. Such a common item, however, has a mysterious detail that is interesting to know. You may not have noticed it, but on both sides of your Converse there are two small holes a few inches apart. At first, it may seem like a random decorative element, but it's not. These two holes not only limit the perspiration of the feet, but they also have a function that we do not guess at first: that of better adjusting the shoe to your foot. Indeed, these two holes are placed at this precise place so that you can insert your laces. With the help of a special maneuver, by inserting the laces in all the holes, starting with the two side holes, you will manage to tighten your shoe. By way of background, the word Converse comes from the brand Converse Rubber Shoe Company, which was founded in 1908 by a man named Marquise Mills. The reason why he gave the name Converse to these shoes is because his mother was named that way. During those years, Mills Company sold boots with non-slip rubber soles to prevent slipping. If you have Converse shoes, don't hesitate to try this trick. You'll be more comfortable in them. Has your attention ever been drawn to the shape of a bottle? You will have noticed that the bottom part is concave, but as in the previous cases, you did not look for the reason. You tell yourself that this detail must be important since it is found in all wine bottles, with a few exceptions. However, the hollow bottom of wine bottles has interesting explanations and origins. We have to go back to the 4th century to find the first application of this process. At that time, glass-blowing techniques were rudimentary, and bottle makers had hard time producing perfectly flat bottoms. In addition, the concavity of the bottom stabilized the bottles, and it was easier to place them on a table. The method was therefore more practical and profitable, and it has spread throughout the ages. Today, glass blowing has evolved considerably, but the hollowing of the bottles has remained. The action of hollowing out the base is called pitting in the trade jargon. On the other hand, it allows a better distribution of the pressure of the carbonic gas in the bottles of sparkling wines such as champagne. You've probably already noticed on your various jeans apparently useless metal buttons fixed at certain places. Would you like to know what these typical jeans ornaments are for? Don't move, we'll tell you. The reason is very interesting. And as for the previous case, you have to go back in time a bit. These buttons are actually rivets, that is to say, fastening elements, like nails. In the 19th century, when the jeans so famous nowadays were just being born, the wearers of this new garment complained that the corners of the pockets were tearing too easily. And indeed, some folds of the fabric were fragile, especially the pockets, handled and used constantly. The tailor Jacob W. Davis, a Latvian tailor, came up with the idea of inserting leather rivets on the pockets and other vulnerable areas. He teamed up with the fashion designer Levi Strauss to patent the invention, as his own funds were insufficient. After that, the use spread, and rivets became a universal feature of jeans. Strictly speaking, the history of these copper rivets is inseparable from the history of jeans themselves. Levi Strauss and Davis are considered the inventors, and it is thanks to them that this type of mixed pants became a worldwide success. Levi Strauss was born in Bavaria and moved to San Francisco at the age of 18 to work as a cloth merchant. He devoted himself to making work uniforms for miners and lumberjacks. He designed clothes that had the characteristics of work clothes, with a wide cut, strong and resistant fabric, and tool pockets. It is in the 30s in the United States that the jeans will reach a wide audience, not only workers. The jeans became very popular with women, students, and American artists. A few years later, they were introduced in Europe and conquered an ever wider clientele, to finally become the essential garment we know today. To return to the rivets, they are certainly less necessary today than they were in the days of Davis and Strauss, since jeans wear much less. Nevertheless, this element still often adorns our pants. It is easy to imagine a golf ball. It is not completely smooth. If you look at it closely, you will notice that it has fine dimples evenly distributed over its surface. You can guess that this is for aerodynamic reasons. But first, let's talk about the fortuitous origin of the special texture of golf balls. In the 18th century, these balls were made in a rather surprising way. They were made of cowhide shreds filled with bird feathers and sewn together by hand. A century later, balls made of gutta percha were used, but this did not meet the requirements of golfers. Indeed, the balls had unsatisfactory trajectories. The ball did not fly far enough. However, it was noticed that the more the game progressed, the more the game improved. This is because the ball became bumpy. The roughness helped the performance. When the ball has dimples, the friction with the air is reduced, and therefore it is not slowed down in its trajectory. This is very convenient for all the players of this sport. In the 20th century, the industry generalized the honeycomb golf balls. Today, this shape is mandatory and is part of the standards to be respected in this sport. In the world of clothing, there are many details, obvious or barely noticeable, that have an unsuspected utility. We've talked about jeans. We've talked about Converse. Now, we'll look at shirts. You may have noticed on the back of your shirt between the shoulder blades a small loop. This is called a cord. Sailors first came up with the idea to hang their shirts more conveniently. This little attachment was so useful that it was included in all the varieties of shirts that were produced, from the cheapest to the most luxurious. Workers used this cord to hang their shirts in their lockers, and athletes in their locker rooms. It also prevented wrinkles and creases when hanging up the shirt after washing. Since irons were not as convenient or efficient as they are today, this cord made life much easier. Today, it is more common to use hangers to store shirts, but this little loop is still present in our shirts. In the shopping cart you borrow at the supermarket, there is a small detail that you ignore and yet would make your life easier. You don't notice it when you are absorbed in your shopping list or in the shelves where the product you are looking for is located. In your shopping cart, there are hooks that have a certain usefulness for customers who want to load their shopping carts properly. These hooks simply allow you to optimize space. By hanging your bags on them, you free up space right at the bottom, and you can safely place fragile products like eggs. This would be great for anyone who needs to get a lot of things purchased. However, if you are a woman, you should not hang your purse on it, because it would be very easy for a thief to get a hold of it, or to steal what is inside without your knowledge. This device is only intended for shopping bags, in case there is a lack of space. This is a piece of information that may be useful to you one day. Let's now take an interest in women's underwear, more particularly to the panties, whose design is more complex than we imagine. These underwear protect the intimate parts, which are a very sensitive zone and very exposed to irritations and infections. That's why the panty manufacturers had a genius idea one day. Have you ever noticed that all panties have a pocket in the middle of the panty, like a lining? Have you ever wondered why? Well, this pocket is what we call a gusset. It is usually made of cotton, and it prevents prolonged rubbing and contact between the intimate area and irritating fabric, such as lace, for example. This gusset therefore provides women with hygienic protection, without which infections would be more frequent. Children love lollipops, and maybe you do too. If so, you've probably noticed a small hole at the end of the white stick after you've bitten off all the colored sugar. But what is the purpose of this hole? A clue to the answer can be found in the first case we saw together. All those who have chewed the stick for a long time after swallowing the whole candy can imagine this little hole quite well. In fact, it has several uses. First, it allows to better fix the candy. Indeed, the manufacturers melt sugar in this tiny hollow so that the candy can hold well. The second purpose is safety, like pen caps. It prevents accidental choking in case children swallow these sticks. If you notice, the whole stick is hollow, precisely to avoid this misfortune. Plastic bottles, whether for fresh water or lemonade, contain a small detail that you may not have noticed. Open the bottle and consider the plastic cap. There is a soft, transparent disc, which is the same diameter as the cap, and which is apparently superfluous. This disc is not essential, but it is better to have it there. If you remove it, you can still close the bottle, but not hermetically. If you put the bottle upside down, the liquid may leak out at the cap. The disc is therefore a very useful element when you want to put your bottle in a briefcase or a backpack. Moreover, it is a carbonated water or soda. This disc ensures the good conservation of the gas contained in the liquid. Now tell us in the comments which of these anecdotal meanings surprised you the most. And don't forget to subscribe and click here to watch another of our videos.